right, we're going to call this hearing to order, especially since we've hit the big time here in the full committee hearing room, and you should see all the technology back here. So if I'm distracted, it's because there's bells and whistles here. We want to welcome Dr. Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress, to talk about her fiscal year 2021 budget request. After that session, we will turn to the budget request for the Government Accountability Office with Comptroller General Gene Dodaro. Dr. Hayden, it's always a treat for members to learn more about the Library of Congress, its mission, and its impact, not just here in Washington, D.C., but in their districts. Your 2021 budget request is about twice the size of the increase Congress was able to provide the library last year. So I have to register a note of caution about your request. The domestic discretionary caps are basically frozen this year after the increases of last year. We will do our best since all of our members are big fans of the library, but it's going to be a tough year. I want to yield to Representative Herrera-Butler for any remarks she may wish to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome Dr. Hayden and Principal Deputy Librarian Mark Sweeney. It's a pleasure to have you. I was thrilled to have Dr. Hayden come out to my district this last year, the Camas Public Library. She was a star. Like, I was like the forgotten, and she, everywhere she goes, and it's true and well earned. We had a fun story hour with kids and Q&A with local librarians that I don't think have ever wanted to meet me, but they were there en masse to meet Dr. Hayden. So thank you. It was a treat to have you fly all the way across the country to help share Americans' library with folks who may not have it in their backyard. In reviewing your 2021 budget requests, I see the library is quite busy, and as a result, there are a lot of different requests and competing priorities, which is a good thing. It means there's stuff happening from the data center transformation to the Congressional Research Services Next Gen Integrated Research and Information System. It's a mouthful. To the modernization of the Copyright Office, it's important to important enhancements at the National Library Service. The library has a lot of exciting transformations happening, and under Dr. Hayden's leadership and organizational changes have allowed the library to tackle so many things at once. And I'll also note that strong support for the appropriators doesn't really hurt either. As we know, the library is also embarking on public-private partnership to transform the experience of visitors who come to the Thomas Jefferson Building here in D.C. And we learned from the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago that the library is to receive, and actually you were in my office 2 days ago? Yesterday. Soon. The $10 million private donation to help fund this initiative, which is exciting. Congress has already appropriated $20 million for this $60 million project, and it is exciting that the funding for half of the renovation's been secured. I think there is an opportunity to transform how people interact with the library, and I look forward to being a partner on this project and reviewing the plan as it evolves. Dr. Hayden, I look forward to your testimony.
Dr. Hayden, if you want to potentially introduce anybody who's here with you, you're more than welcome to do that as well. And look forward to your comments.
Principal Deputy Librarian Mr. Mark Sweeney is here, as also staff members, senior staff members from the various units, CRS, the National Library Services for the Blind and Print Disabled, as well as the Copyright Office are here, and Mr. Bud Barton, our head CIO, is here as well. So there might be items that they could add some information to as we move along. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Herrera-Butler, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of the library's fiscal 2021 budget. Now in my 4th year as Librarian of Congress, I am excited to see the progress we've made in sharing more of the library's resources and collections and our staff's expertise with their commitment to public service. And I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for your support in the 2020 funding bill. Our top priority remains expanding user access, public engagement with the library's resources and services, and your significant fiscal 2020 support for the visitor experience over 3 years is helping us transform the magnificent Jefferson Building, finished at the end of the 19th century into a state-of-the-art destination for discovering, creating, and learning in the 21st century. The planning and design process is underway for the Treasures Gallery, the Orientation Gallery, and the Youth Center/Learning Center. The redesigned spaces will open in phases beginning in late calendar 2022. We want our visitors to be better connected with the Library of Congress and learn about our country and our cultural heritage after seeing and learning about our collections, such as Thomas Jefferson's library, the Rosa Parks papers, the map Lewis and Clark used on their exhibition to the American West. We want them to see it firsthand. I greatly appreciate the funding you've given us to meet additional high-priority needs, such as enhanced functionality of the Congress.gov system, delivering talking and Braille books and magazines via the internet, optimizing the capacity of our Financial Services Directorate, supporting Phase 2 of the Data Center Transformation and Network Modernization Initiative, and much more. I also want to thank you for your continued support for the collection storage modules at Fort Meade as part of the architect of the Capitol's budget. Your strong support for modernization allows us to move forward on next-generation systems. For example, CRS's Integrated Research and Information System, IRIS, a new electronic recordation system for the Copyright Office, and that data center transformation project, scheduled to be completed this fiscal year. The library's funding request for 2021 continues modernization in a strategically sequenced, systematic, and very deliberate way. The fiscal 2021 appropriations request aligns with the strategic goals set forth in the fiscal 2019 to 2023 strategic plan. Those goals: expand access, enhance services, optimize resources, and measure impact. The Library of Congress fiscal 2021 budget request is for approximately $830 million, which represents a 7% increase over the library's fiscal 2020 enacted appropriation. This request includes $38 million in mandatory pay and price level increases. The balance of the increase represents critical program investments necessary to fulfill the library's role and to move forward on the commitment to become more user-centered. The budget seeks to expand service to Congress by enhancing the depth and the breadth of CRS's research capacity on current and emerging legislative issues related to science and technology. In the critical area of cybersecurity, we are requesting funding for security enhancements to protect congressional and other digital high-value assets, including sensitive information from CRS, the Law Library, and the U.S. Copyright Office. Our responsibility to be good stewards of the world's largest library is reflected in our storage and preservation requests. We seek funding to replace the third of 4 quadrants of compact shelving in the Law Library. The shelving houses a significant portion of what is acknowledged as the world's largest and most comprehensive collection of international, foreign, national, and comparative legal resources. The request to rebalance the library's preservation program requires no additional funding, and we believe it is the best and most cost-effective way to move forward so that our collections will be accessible for generations to come. We ask your support for our request to repurpose the funding we have been spending on mass methods since the 1990s to rebalance the preservation needs of our collection. This includes conservation of the library's most significant artifacts, reformatting of fragile and irreplaceable items, and the content management and information technology infrastructure necessary to preserve the digital collections. In closing, the 2021 congressional budget justification continues to help modernization across the library. We thank you for your support, and I'd be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden. It's always a joy to get the update from the Library of Congress and the Librarian of Congress. We're going to start with questions, and we'll start with Ms. Herrera-Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have a I have a bunch of questions here. I'm going to start with one about the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled. I have a few of my questions are a little bit around work-life balance and access. This one, I want to start here. So talks of finding the National Library Services a new office have been ongoing for quite some time. Several options have been thrown around, such as the Page Dorm, the government publishing office, and space within the library campus itself. I understand your current Taylor Street location, for which you have been located for longer than I've been around, has some security and building condition challenges. So what is the status of finding a new location for the National Library Services? And as we continue to put money into that lease, what are some challenges you're facing with the costs associated with that lease?
You are definitely correct in terms of the length of the rental facility on Taylor Street. It's approximately 50 years of rental there. And we have been involved with the architect of the Capitol's assessment over the past few years of the 3 potential locations. One, the old House Page Dorm, that's at 501 First Street, the Government Publishing Office, GPO, and also looking at the possibility of incorporating NLS into existing library facilities. And the AOC identified the 501 First Street as the preferred location. And basically, the main focus of making sure that the service is connected physically and synergy of having NLS part of the library's entire physical and closer to what we are doing has been the motivating factor of making sure that they have the most up-to-date facility and are prepared to offer even more services to more people in the future. And so we are awaiting congressional guidance, AOC specifically, and the current lease, and there is a sense of urgency because the current lease ends in January of 2026. And in order to make plans to either be prepared to move to a new location, all of these things, it's getting critical that we have some indication of where
From
we're
AOC.
going. Yes, and AOC is waiting on congressional guidance, so.
Okay. Switching gears a little bit, and you may or may not be able to speak to this, but we had a couple of weeks ago, Office of Congressional Workplace Rights, Susan Grundeman, and one of the things we have tasked her with was really helping us evaluate and address issues of harassment or hostile workplace, right? She's had a big task. One of the things that she mentioned was they added the library employees to their caseload. So it wasn't just congressional legislative employees, they added the library. And with that came a significant bump in cases and types of cases. And, we weren't able to get a lot of clarity about that. I wondered if that's something you're familiar with, harassment cases. Now, this is something, as I'm sitting here thinking, I wanted to ask about. If that's something that the library has any responsibility in, as that's been obviously it's under her office now. You're getting ready to answer because I think this might be.
We're both getting.
I'd like you to speak to it a little bit, just for clarity purposes for us and for me understanding if there's just a big backlog. Or if there's a culture issue, which I can't believe, but that's why I got to ask.
And Mark Sweeney will both tag team on this one because, of course, workplace environment is a high priority. We value the staff. We have one of the most dedicated workforces I've had the honor to work with. And when you look at the number of incidents that might have been transferred or included, you're going from a 10 to 5 to 10. And the library has a very robust program. And this is a welcome addition that gives staff another vehicle as well. So in terms of going from 5 to 10, that seems to double, but it's, when you look at the workforce of roughly about 3,400 and what the disposition of the cases are, we are working closely to make sure that that employees, the main thing is that employees have as many options and opportunities to express anything, so. And Mark, if you want to add anything.
Well, the library does have a duplicate or a parallel program. We have an EEO diversity program as well. And you can pursue both tracks, both internally or through OCWR.
Currently, or you have to choose one?
You can concurrently be in them. And obviously, we were carrying that workload, and so you can carry that over on the ACWAR side. In terms of the total number of cases that we haven't experienced an increase in what we have coming through our EEODP program.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, because she was talking about a bit increase in hers, but I think it's just opening the door to allow the concurrent.
Right. And that's very good, to open a door for more options for employees and staff members to have.
I yield back because I'm over time. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If you have another question, you can
Well,
follow up.
Just along that vein, because, she gave us a lot of numbers and you're thinking quick. As a mom in this place, I want to make sure that, women and moms or pregnant moms have reasonable accommodations, right? And this is a great thing that we're now having to grapple with. How do we make sure that we're being equitable? And I've introduced legislation in this, and I just wanted to ask about the library in this sense and what types. I will say, just empirically, we had our staff meeting over there, and one of your folks was like, "Oh, you need a place to pump? Well, I'll make this happen." But I just wanted to see what types of considerations you're taking into account for your 3,000 plus employees.
Laura, I've been very concerned from this beginning of my tenure, because I have always felt that the workplace should be a place that is supportive of whoever is there, and we have a responsibility to that, and to look at life conditions, whether it's taking care of an elder parent or needing some flexibility with childcare and things like that. So the library, and so I did ask about lactation centers, and the library has up-to-date equipment and also has done even more to make sure that all of the campus buildings have very attractive and secure and safe facilities, as well as working with the managers and having training on how to work with staff members and encourage them to talk about life issues and what things are happening during regular performance evaluation and work plan. Not to have an evaluation at the end and say you missed a lot of time and, I'm going to do this, but maybe say I'm noticing that you're coming in a little later with that. So really doing more with training of managers to be able to help employees. So we are very conscious of that. And I must say, take your child to work day is very lively at the library. Yeah.
Mr. Newhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Ranking Member. Welcome, Dr. Hayden. Always a pleasure to have you here. I can't believe it's been 4 years, but time goes by quickly. I would be remiss if I didn't start by thanking you for coming to my district last year.
Yes.
People are still talking about your visit. It was awesome, and thank you very much for making the Library of Congress come alive for people, even out in the hinterland. We appreciate that very much. It was a special time, and for bringing your mother with you.
She enjoys
Yeah, yeah.
learning.
Dr. Hayden, I think they're running a coup to get the library to go to Washington State. I know what they're doing
Is
here.
it working?
It's pretty good.
So one of the things that I've embraced in my district is the whole Veterans History Project. We've been fortunate enough to interview dozens of veterans, getting their testimonials to preserve them. In fact, last week at a senior symposium, and we offered that again to veterans in attendance. And so I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that project and how you, through this budget, intend to work with that or make it available to more people.
I'm very pleased that you mentioned the Veterans History Project and the opportunity to actually have staff members from the library and visit districts and provide training, as well as the online resources for veterans history that people can go online wherever they are. We are working on the possibility of an actual app. We were very fortunate to have a pilot with a donated application that gave us a lot of information about what we might need to do as we move forward with that. And we are, as you probably know, we have expanded to the Gold Star families as well.
Right.
And that is a very important part. So the Veterans History Project is part of our American Folklife Center that is embedded into the Library Services Directorate, and a very important part of that. So we are making sure that we increase awareness of the program. And in fact, it will be incorporated into the visitor experience in the Orientation Center. The new Orientation Center will not only let people know about the history of the library and what the collections are, but also the services. So within that Orientation Center will be and I'm doing this because it's going to be a panel and a touch screen that will let people know about veterans history, and hopefully the technology will allow them to download things, the training kit, and find out more information. So part of the audio-visual aspect of the Orientation Center is to help us get those types of enhancements so visitors can find out about it and look up their own maybe familial association, and that's very important. And we found, too, that people want to find out other people that they served with and look back and say, my dad served this or something like that. So it has to be a pretty robust mechanism, but that's one that will be included in the visitor experience.
Good.
Because we see that so many people, it touches so many people in so many ways. I've just heard about the Merchant Marines the other day. Are we making sure that we're including Merchant Marines in the veterans history? So
Good, awesome. So glad you're doing all
part,
that.
yeah.
It's really important, really important. I want to ask you, too, about the, in your budget, you talk about the phasing out of the mass de-acidification project.
one of the preservation methods that the library has used.
Yeah, I'm all for preservation, don't get me wrong, I really am. But I'm just trying to make sure we have the information to make the right decision. In your cost estimates, you talk about there's a fancy word for cold storage, that projects out the cost of that out for 40 years. The de-acidification, I believe, can allow documents to be preserved for 300+ years. So I just want to make sure we're comparing,
Right.
apples to apples here in the cost assessments of both options to make sure that we're making the right choices.
And you're definitely right about making sure that we're looking long-term, and with the responsibility that the Library of Congress has as the nation's library, as well as the cultural repository for this nation and our collecting, that's a major concern, and we have to look to the future as we preserve the past. And so that's why I'm really pleased that Mark Sweeney is able to provide even more insight, because when this aspect of preservation started, Mark has been with the library over 30 years in various capacities, and he was the head of the Preservation and Conservation Department.
Right.
So I'll let Mark
Okay.
give you a little more sense of the history of preservation at the library, and then
Well, I mainly want to know the cost comparison and
Oh,
and the
he's-
justification for this
he's-
decision of going to cold storage versus the acidification.
I think one of the most important things to remember about the preservation program is that we need to address a wide variety of materials in different formats, whether it's physical or a digital asset or collection item. Deacidification focuses on paper material, acidic in nature, that has not already become too embrittled to go through this chemical process. We've been at this, following this program for 20 years. We've invested $100 million in it.
We're 90% done, right? Something
We're
like that.
90% done of the highest priority items for treatment, 70% over what of the original estimate of what we would do. Of course, this whole chemical approach emerged in the late 90s and was focused on the challenges of the collections that existed at that time. It's 20 years later. We have an explosion of digital content that we need to collect. It's probably the most at-risk content that we have. So in this rebalancing, what we're looking to do is to shift our resources in a neutral way within our budget, to focus more on the emerging or the current challenges that we have. Cold storage is what we would call optimized environmental storage, provides a broader benefit for our collections because it's not exclusive to acidic books. It can be used for a wide variety of materials in our collection to extend their useful life. We've done extensive studies. We looked at this, did a market analysis of this several years ago. We've had an IG report on this as well, and then we followed up with an economic cost study with consultants on the merits, one way or another, with cost, looking at these two alternatives. Happy to provide additional detail on that. We've got quite a bit of research that we've done on it.
Okay. I think that helps me understand better. A lot of the materials don't lend themselves to the deacidification. But my question, and I think you've helped me with that, was if the cost for the cold storage are just looked at for 40 years, certainly it's going to cost money to keep those freezers on for the next 40 years and the next 40 years and on in, 300 to 1,000 years as it would have compared to the deacidification. So that's where what my train of thought was. So I wanted to make sure that all that was being considered.
Yes.
Yeah. Interestingly, I learned a long time ago, I think the best way to preserve any written material is etched in stone. So that could take a while to do all that. So, but anyway, thank you very much. Again, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
So I know you touched upon the visitor's experience, so this is kind of our big project that, when I talk to members, this is what captures everyone's imagination. So we're super excited to try to accomplish this with you. If you can give us a little bit of a sense, we know the plan is to add $20 million in private funding to the total of $40 million in federal funds, and the need for funding is probably fairly high in the early years, which we would assume is the case. You're signing contracts, construction, displays, and all of that. So combining both the federal and the private funding, and we want to thank Mr. Rubenstein for his amazing contribution to the library. How much do you estimate you will need to obligate in fiscal years 21 and 22 to continue the project going uninterrupted?
And I want to echo that appreciation for Mr. Rubenstein, a $10 million gift of the $20 million on the private, really, commitment is significant, and he's also acquired a commitment from the Annenberg Foundation for an additional $1 million, and he has been very active in terms of a development plan on that side. So we
Fantastic.
thank him for that.
That's real money even around here, you know.
There will be a critical path schedule with outside vendors in the next few weeks, and in terms of the total committing, and if you excuse me for putting on my glasses at this point, because it does get a little more technical with the actual.
Without objection.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just to recap, the $10 million that was appropriated in 2018, $2 billion was for the master plan that was approved, and then the remaining $8 million was released upon that, and then the $10 million appropriated in fiscal 2020 allowed us to work with the AOC on initial design work, and specifically for the Treasures Gallery. The additional funding in this request will allow us to move forward with the audiovisual components. I mentioned some of the things that we would like to do in terms of veterans history and other things as well. And so we will be having exhibit fabrication, speaking of new terms, but actually making things as well. So that's the exhibit fabrication, $4 million to be obligated this fiscal year, as well as the AV and Interactives productions. So the total to be obligated would be 9.55 for those specific things. The other parts are going along with AOC and those design costs as well.
The exhibit fabrication, tell me about that.
And speaking of a fancy word to use, it is construction, fabrication. You have design, you have blueprints, but when you actually are contracting out to have something made. And those are items, exhibit cases, then case work that are made off-site, and you contract with an exhibit designer. I'm looking around the room to try to see if there's some examples, but basically exhibit cases and case work, and that's what the fabrication, they're going to start. And the design that's going on now and had been designed from the sketches are now into really things that a carpenter or electrician or whoever's involved can actually start making what has been designed.
We mentioned David Rubenstein, and I know we've had several conversations around development in a development office around increasing the private funding that may be available out there. You look at this project, and it's such a magnificent project. It's tied to the history of the country. It's tied literally to Thomas Jefferson in his library. So what is happening with any new efforts to go out and try to acquire more private money?
One of the most exciting things that happened was we hired Ms. Catherine Milliken. She was formerly at the Smithsonian Institution in their development department, and specifically their regional fundraising. So she was responsible for going around the country and working with potential donors and making sure that that's so she's been with us about 7 months now and is working with Mr. Rubenstein, and we have supplemented some of the staff members that are available to be part of the fundraising effort, and we will be hiring a person that is specifically tasked with foundations and corporations and growing our private fundraising group, the James Madison Council. Mr. Rubenstein is the chair of that. And so we are going to our closest donors first. And he already has, at their last meeting, reiterated his commitment and what he expects that he might see from them. So it's very robust, and he is raring to go, basically. And the commitment and having the partnership with Congress has been something that has really helped.
Great.
That they know that they are helping and in partnership with Congress.
Great. Well, we appreciate that, and if there's anything we can do from our end to, facilitate and encourage, because obviously we want as much help as we can get, as soon as we can get it. So we get
Yes.
the project up and running, and
Right, he's,
let the American people see it and feel it and taste it. So with that, we have a special guest that arrived. Chairwoman, I yield.
Well, thank you, Mr.
Chairwoman
Chair, and welcome.
thank you.
I will say you have many admirers on this panel, and I'm sure every chair would be filled if we didn't have many other hearings. I know I've been juggling back and forth, but I wanted to be sure to be here and thank you and your excellent team for the important work you're doing. We really are privileged to have a place like the Library of Congress here in Washington in the United States of America, and we all have an obligation to keep it as great as it is. And you certainly have ramped up development efforts in search of private funding for the Visitor Experience Project, and the library, with all its grandeur and history, seems a natural candidate to approach private funders for support. You estimate the project will require totals of $40 million in federal funds, $20 million in private fundraising overall. If we're fortunate, maybe the private funds will match the public funds as well. So if we're combining federal and private money, can you estimate, and if you already did, I apologize, what you will need for fiscal years 2021 and 2022?
The request for fiscal 21 is for 10 million appropriated funding, and 22 would be the remaining 10 million for the entire 40 million of appropriated funding. And I just have to say that you are really on track with the potential of raising private funding to support ongoing exhibits, ongoing programming, and really establishing the Library of Congress as a philanthropic opportunity and investment for the private sector that is comparable to other cultural institutions in Washington, Smithsonian, other institutions that have and I use that term robust quite a bit because in fundraising that seems to be the term, but they have larger staffs and everything like that. But I think the Library of Congress definitely has a very wonderful opportunity to let people know that investing in the Library of Congress would be something that would help the nation.
And they'd be privileged to assist, I'm
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
The library, as I understand it, receives 2.1 million items a year for its collections. I know you plan to digitize recent and future acquisitions, if appropriate, but you still have an enormous amount of material to store. How long will your long-term storage at Fort Meade handle the flow of materials coming in? And do you foresee a time when the library will need to become more selective about materials it accepts because of limited storage capability?
The library is very selective at this point and will continue to be. And the aspect of the Library of Congress that makes us really confident that for the history will never stop, and the types of items that the Library of Congress collects, personal manuscripts, collections that are different from even most academic libraries or university libraries or school and definitely public libraries, necessitates the fact that we will have storage needs and storage in all formats. And so Mark Sweeney was giving our principal deputy librarian, who has been involved with this for quite a while. I'd like him to add some insight for you.
Well, I know there are others who are eager to ask you questions. So I just wanted to stop by
Oh, of course.
and thank you very much for your leadership and all the important work that you and your distinguished group are doing. This is an incredible place for us as members of Congress, and when I look at those ceilings, it's a magnificent place that should be shared, and any way that we can encourage more people to come and share the excellence of this place is important, and we look forward to continue to support your efforts. And I thank you for appearing before, and I apologize that I have to leave again. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chairwoman Lowy.
Mark,
If you have anything to say for the
Well,
good of the order here,
because, Mark, go ahead.
Mark.
I would just add that our current Fort Meade facility plan originated in 2000, and it covers 2000 to 2026, and it called for 13 storage modules. We're currently opening, we will be opening in the following year, Module 6. So we are behind in building that capacity. But we are in the process right now with AOC reviewing that plan and establishing the need from 2020 to 2050. But it is, the continued collection storage is essential to the Library of Congress. Collections will never stop, but they do change at the form, physical, digital, motion pictures, books. It's a wide variety of material, and the Fort Meade modules is the most efficient way for us to manage those collections for the long term.
And I have to add that the Library of Congress, as the nation's library, will be collecting into the future when other libraries will not. When you think about different types of libraries, I mentioned university and college libraries and public libraries, pretty familiar with those, and school libraries, and actual school libraries. They possibly in the future will count on a national library to collect things that they will be able to rebalance their own portfolios and their immediate needs of the people who are coming in from their community. So, for instance, the Library of Congress might collect the materials that J.K. Rowling, we wish, but that's the British Library, but that type of famous author, all of the manuscripts, all of the things, in even digital form in the future, because they will be writing, maybe not with things that are printed out, but they'll be sending, as they're starting to do now, Mr. Beecham, they'll be creating things digitally. And so we'll have to store things digitally. We'll have to store the material that led to the actual book, and then the latest Harry Potter or whatever it is, a public library wouldn't collect that. So we collect unique items, Teddy Roosevelt's diaries, those types of things, and there will be other collections and other significant historic collections that will be coming to the library. We just received the opera singer Jessie Norman, who passed recently. She is giving and had given her papers to the Library of Congress. So there'll be different things and different formats that we will be working on in other libraries, and even college libraries might not be collecting.
Well, we can't thank you enough, and to your team who remain nameless sometimes, we know all the great work
Dedicated.
that they do, and it's not easy to be a government employee today, and we just want to say on behalf of the committee, thank you for all of your good work that goes unseen, but we know that it's your effort that makes this such a spectacular institution and one of the hallmarks of this country. So we want to thank you for all of the good work day in and day out, and we appreciate it. And Dr. Hayden, obviously your leadership has been tremendous, and I love seeing you. I love meeting with you. I love hearing about the library and your passion that you bring to this. So we're going to do the best we can for you.
Well, thank you.
And, you know, as we said, this is a really, really tough situation that I think all of us are put in with the budget caps and everything. But this is something that we think is very, very special. The projects that you spearhead are important. And, you know, to the extent we can help you, we're going to help you. But we just want to let you know right out of the gate that it's a tough year for all the committees. But, you know, whatever we give is going to be all we can give. And it's not necessarily a sign of our passion, because if we could give you a heck of a lot more, we would, which is why we're encouraging you with Mr. Rubenstein and others to try to let us know how we can help on that end as well. So
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless. This hearing is adjourned.